A very good evening and welcome to this edition of the Fourth Estate. Charles Mwangushampagi. A region in crisis, a political crisis. What are the implications to the economics of this region? On Friday, President Yoweri Museveni came out and publicly stated that he is for the amendment of Article 102B, which will clear the way for him to run again in 2021. And he said the NIM has embraced this and will be pushing for it. He looked out for those who are against him, or against the change of that article. He said that this is his project. But people have been asking, what are the implications economically for this country? Especially we have seen that economic performance, growth numbers have been declining lately. What does it mean? Kenya is where everyone else is watching. If the crisis, the political standoff in Kenya stretches longer than it already has, will Uganda be able to continue to rely on the Mombasa route to bring what all its imports, where all our imports come from? Yes, there's been increased use of the Central Corridor through Tanzania, but it's not enough. Most people importing into this country still prefer the Kenyan route. But also, what are the implications on investment in the Kenyan economy, which is the biggest economy in the East African region, too, because arising out of that political situation in that country. Also take a look at Tanzania and the other countries in the region. To discuss those and many other issues on the show tonight with me is, let me start with the publisher and editor of the Uganda Confidential, Mr. Teddy Sezicheye.
Good evening, viewers.
Mr. Cheye is an investigative journalist, and he's been investing a lot of his journalism for many years, focusing on the economics of things, and wrote an article that's been debated and shared extensively today, published in the Sunday Monitor, where you respond to President Museveni's response to Robert Senta Muchagulanyi, and you're questioning his numbers. You say our GDP growth actually in real terms should be $47.
47,
yeah, 47.
Our GDP income per capita.
Income per capita is at $47. And you're doing a comparison. I have a long 2 pages here of an Excel sheet you developed tracking our performance from 1986 going all the way to 2120.
That's when we shall be a lower middle income.
In 2120, according to Teddy Sezicheye, Uganda will finally hit lower middle income of $1,353 US.
Who will be the president? 2120.
2120.
Yeah.
I have no idea. The government's target is to reach lower middle income status.
Oh, 21.
21, not 2020. We have
100 years from now.
From now. We'll debate those numbers.
About 103 years.
Yeah, that's
Wanapito Ekomoloit,
Somebody could have
he's
lived
Legal and
after
Corporate
that.
Affairs Director at Nile Breweries AB InBev, and a panelist on this show.
Good evening, Charles, and good evening, viewers.
Dr. Patrick Wakida. Dr. Patrick Wakida is the Chief Executive Officer of Research World International. They do research. I understand you have done a dipstick on political sentiments in the country so far, but you're also conducting a deeper research into where this whole thing is going.
Yes, we plan to have that available.
And you're an economist, are you?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And finally, we have Arthur Larocque. Arthur Larocque is Country Director at Action Aid International Uganda. Their offices were raided about 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago?
3 weeks.
3 weeks ago. And your accounts were frozen this past week. Arthur, very nice to have you.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and good evening, viewers.
And at Action Aid, you have been doing a lot of scenario building, a lot of weighing the political economy. Is that what it's called? The political economy of the country and the region, of course, because you operate, you're a federated institution. Let me start with you, Mr. Chair. And this question will come across the table for all of us. While we are debating the politics, something we've discussed on this show before, we're debating the politics. The full-blown standoff in Kenya, whether they will have an election on October 26th or not, is not determined now. The pool of potential candidates has expanded back to the original number of 8. One of the major contenders who claims he won that election but was rigged out, Raila Odinga of the National Super Alliance, has said he will not contest in that election, be participating in an election run by this same Electoral and Boundaries Commission. President Uhuru Kenyatta and his Jubilee think this should be the election to lose, but the other candidates have come back after that AUKO petition. But in Uganda, you're also looking at what is going on. So let's start in Kenya and see what's your reading of the political implications to the economics. How will the economics be affected?
First of all, thank you, Charles. Well, before I answer that, I'd like to quickly show the different type of democracy in Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Uganda. In Rwanda, you have what I call a status quo democracy. The status quo democracy is that they have to keep the status quo going. In Tanzania, you have what I see as the Anini-looking democracy, conservative in nature, and very suspicious of the capitalist country, Kenya and Uganda, especially with their poisonous influence of land grabbing. You go to Kenya. So Kenya has, before I go to Kenya, I come back to Uganda. Uganda has a democracy of voter buying democracy. For them, they buy. They don't care about when they get their votes because of buying. They have no obligation to deliver services and the goods because they buy their elections. So it is a voter buying democracy. Kenya is a service delivery democracy because they go out for people to vote. So if we look at what Kenyatta has done in 4 years, it's amazing. So, and then on top of that, you must know that in Kenya, from Mzee Kenyatta, then Moi, then Mwai Kibaki, and now Uhuru Kenyatta, every regime that took over improved on the previous one. The economic, the development that Kenyatta has done in the last 4 years is amazing. It's much more than what Kenya got in 50 years in many areas. And because of the economic class, the people who have similar economic interests, there are many. Nairobi is divided. You have rich Luos, you have rich, every tribe has rich people there. You have a big building next to of somebody from Raira's place, next to the one from Mr. Kenyatta's place. So the economy has integrated them. This thing will pass.
But the voting patterns haven't changed. They're still highly tribal.
But even if the voting pattern hasn't changed, but what has changed is that because of that economic mix, if you look at members of parliament, Raila Odinga's members of parliament in the parliament are not treated the way Museveni treated FDC MPs. If you look at the senator, the other day Kenyatta was campaigning in Kilifi, in Malindi, and Taveta, and he would say, look, this is a member of parliament from the opposition. You elected him, but we are developing this place together, and he was there, which cannot happen here. Museveni cannot go to Kasese and tell the voters, this is Winnie Chiza, you elected her, I work with her. So because of that, to me, I think, because of the economic networking, the carpet of the threads of economy has weaved them together. This thing they are overpass, and Kenya will march on. Okay. Because of what he has done.
Okay. You can hold the answer to my question with the background that you've given. I'll give you opportunity to answer that. Let me quickly come to Onapito. Yes, there are lots of people who think that because of the economic interests and how Kenya has tried to sustain itself, I mean to look at itself as a country that is on the forward march towards economic success, that the political disagreements are going to have to subdue themselves to the interests of building that economy, or of the economics. Do you think that holds?
Yeah, I think because the Kenyan economy is quite heavily internationalized, and there's a lot of international presence. Maybe that's what will make a difference in terms of economic interests prevailing to bring order. Because we saw it in the past when there was a forced settlement between Kibaki and Odinga, which was largely driven by the Western powers, because Kenya is both economic security and political nexus for the Western powers in East Africa. So on that score alone, the economic interests may force some kind of either they will gauge that Huru is strong enough to hold and they will ignore Odinga, or if they feel Uhuru is not holding enough, then they may force some kind of postponement of the election or even a power sharing arrangement. So I think you have already had noises from a lot of Western countries. Odinga and his deputy have been in the Western world, so I'm sure this coming week there may be new dynamics in their politics. Yeah.
Dr. Okida.
Yes.
Let's stay a little bit more on the Kenyan question, and, but like Cheye did, you could expand it to look at the broader region. What are those unique? Is it a Western settlement that will resolve the Kenyan political crisis, like happened in 2007, 2008? Is it going to be an internally generated pressure from the people who live together in Muthaiga, for example, are going to have to coalesce to find how to manage those who live together in Mathare?
Probably, let me put a preamble that when you mismanage politics, the consequence falls on the economy. Politics is a driver of economic stability. And what you're seeing in the region, what you're seeing in Kenya, is not good for the economy. If I was an investor based in Washington and I want to come and invest in Kenya, I would be thinking, is my investments safe? And whether the decision for stabilizing Kenya is going to come from an outside or inside, the central rallying point lies on the people within Kenya to create a stable political environment that can attract people. And I think that's the mistake people make. To think that Washington will cough and the Africans this way will listen. No. It is like keeping a beer in a bottle cold enough. When you start to shake it stupidly, you lose the whole of it. It will run out of the bottle. But you know, it has been so quiet. Now, what you see in Kenya is something that started on independence. You have the Luos and other tribes on this side, and then you have the Chikuyu and the other smaller tribes on the other side. Now, unfortunately, the smaller tribes tend to dominate. So they will have to agree to live together and know that this is our Kenya and we are Kenyans and we must build Kenya.
Yes, but the question that Cheye was raising is that these people live side by side. That you can't draw a line. When they go to the golf clubs, to the high-end areas, they actually intertwined.
Yes.
And that is what some people have said has facilitated easier political settlement and accommodation in Kenya, unlike Uganda, or unlike other East African countries, because the economic interests of the key political players find a meeting point, which you don't have here.
But Charles, before the doctor answers, I think to me, the Kenyans summed it well in their recent demonstration. They say this is not Uganda.
This is not Uganda.
Yes.
And there are a lot of factors. Look, Kenya had its turn of a strongman leader. In term, okay, maybe two of them, Kenyatta and Moi. And the end of the Moi era changed Kenyan politics radically to remove the strongman, to move to kind of institutional arrangement. Because even the Uhuru is only strong as far as Ruto and his alliance are holding. That's why you find he takes Ruto everywhere like he's shopping. Boy, I've never known any president and his deputy, not even the Western world, who go everywhere except maybe the toilet, moving together. So, but look, in Uganda, we are still in a stage of a strongman leader. I mean, you can say what you like. President Museveni is a strongman, for better or for worse.
So, Doctor, you can conclude your thoughts.
I think for me, if you look at the East African community of the 1960s, you can attest this. There were divisions of markets. They said, Uganda, you are good at the comparative advantages for you to go in the garden and produce for us maize. And so was Tanzania. The Kenyan economy has always been a business. That means there are a lot of business interests, as Cheye says, in Kenya. I gave an interview immediately after the elections of Kenya. Somebody was saying, again, they are going to fight like they did in 2007. And they said it's not going to happen.
It can't happen, yeah, that's true.
It can't happen because they learned something from that 2007, 2008 fights. I have seen the international...
The bloody demonstrations in Kenya just on Friday.
Yeah,
I think 3 people were killed. So you're moving slowly towards the disruptions that we saw in... I mean the chaos that we saw in...
You see the climax, the anger of loss happens immediately after the loss. Just feel when you've just lost somebody. Elections ended. I know they are going to have another election. But I don't think that elections that they are going to have will bring out emotions.
Oh wow! It will have the worst emotions.
Okay.
when you don't have the main challenger contesting.
But the main challenger is going to oppose the election and his group.
Isn't that where the debate
They are going to they are going to turn out
is he going to say
to
that
stop polling. That's what they want to do. They want to stop the elections violently.
Yeah.
So how can you avoid violence?
I hope they don't do that.
You hope they don't do that?
Yeah.
You're a numbers guy. You don't live on hope. You live on the numbers. You do the
You see, actually, I was telling somebody that in a competitive politics like that of Kenya, where you have the margin of error of +3 -3, and you have the leading candidate in a poll with 48, the other one is 47. It's a divided country. Totally divided country. Just as you say, anything can happen. But I pray that it doesn't happen.
Arthur, let me come to you finally. In a region like the East African community, as we have now, when there's a political crisis in one country, you expect that the political dividend, the economic dividends are going to be reaped by the next country. We saw that happen during the years of Amin.
Yeah.
When Uganda was dysfunctional, Kenya took advantage.
Yes.
Produced
like
everything that Uganda consumed.
Yes.
From powder milk to everything. And that dynamic hasn't changed. So you would imagine that at a time like this, when countries are competing towards economic, not political success, because the imagination around the East African community was, you have answered the political question, especially for a country like Uganda, that moved from turbulence to turbulence to turbulence. Now, do you see that Uganda is positioning itself or can take advantage of any crisis that emerges in Kenya or in Tanzania or elsewhere?
Well, yeah, I think the analysis that Che has done for 103 years from now would suggest we can't take advantage of anything, really, quite honestly.
Exactly.
I think it so much depends on the character of the politics as well as the kinds of investments that we put in place. I don't think Uganda, as it is now, is really competitive in terms of having an economic edge, competitive edge, perhaps even Tanzania.
Who does in the region, out of the 6 members?
I think Kenya is quite advanced. Tanzania, I think they have made some investments that are worthy of progress in that country, despite other problems that they do have. But I wanted to come back to the question about Kenya and the economics of the politics, like you said earlier. I do think that it's important, you know, when politics stumbles, like we say, many things collapse. And so if the region doesn't get its political act together, there will always be destructive contestations. That we are seeing in DRC, we are seeing in South Sudan, we are seeing in Uganda, we are seeing in Burundi. Like Che said, in Rwanda, there are some simmering tensions. Perhaps they haven't come out as expressly as they have come out in other countries, but all is not well politically. So unless we get our political questions right, even the economy will continue to struggle. When the kinds of images you see about contestations in Uganda and Kenya are certainly not good for anybody who thinks about investment, like Wakida has just mentioned. And the internationalization of Kenya's economy, like Ona says, is real, but I don't think it's a guarantee for stability. I don't think Kenya is dramatically different today than it was in 2007. I actually think that country could still blow. I think it could blow because inequality. We have an office in Kenya, and the communities we work with, their living standards are not dramatically different with the kinds of people we work with in Uganda. So inequality, because of the economic paradigm, the economic model that a lot of our countries have adopted, quite often uncritically, or because the powers that be benefit of it, is problematic. So for as long as we don't have justice, equality, there will always be a problem because people will always resist injustice. So I think it's critical to deal with the serious political problems the region has, and then you will create a context in which economy can flourish. I think that's crucial.
Let me just continue with you for a moment, because we'll be now drifting to discuss a little bit more about Uganda. You are a service delivery NGO largely, and we are debating politics. And I've been asking this question several times here and elsewhere. I do not see the economic discussion guiding the political debate that we have in this country. What would you attribute that to? Because Uganda remains heavily subsidized by people like you at Action Aid, who are delivering protected springs. If my earliest recollection of Action Aid's work, and I think Oxfam was building protected springs, sinking boreholes, delivering food relief and stuff like that. And people say maybe because groups like yours are doing this, then it doesn't elevate that to political pressures on the political decision makers who are now out there consulting. What would it take to get that discussion in that direction?
I believe that context you have defined or described is perhaps what used to happen in the 80s, perhaps early 90s. I think a lot has changed. Action Aid still works in service delivery, but I think more than half of our resources is no longer direct service delivery because it's of itself, it's not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. We need to deal with the political questions of the day because we've built schools, we've built health centers, but as NGOs, we are unable to sustain certain service delivery interventions for a long time. It eventually has to be either the private sector or the state to take advantage of it. So we've done many innovations in the past, whether it's non-formal education in Mubende, whether it's investments in school constructions in Kwen, in Pade, where we were just commissioning a school the other day. But at the end of the day, the way we mobilize resources and the dynamics that are happening in Europe cannot guarantee this service delivery approach. Uganda is collecting more taxes today than before. The question is, are we allocating those taxes to advance and replace, eventually strengthen state authority and eventually deal with the questions of service delivery? So I don't think NGOs today as big subsidy players for the government as they were in the 80s and 90s. And that's why when you think about what's happening to the organization at the moment, I don't think the problem is because we are moving away from service delivery or whatever it is. It's because we have begun to challenge, I think, certain power issues, which we believe are important. Action Aid fundamentally believes that poverty and injustice and inequality is simply a result of unequal power relations. Unless we deal with the power question, the long-term transformation is not possible.
Che, let me come back to you briefly. You wrote a piece in the Sunday Monitor today responding to President Museveni, which I did in my introduction. One of the things you question is the president's numbers.
Yes.
You challenge what the numbers say in his response letter. You question also the claim to security.
Yes.
You respond, you highlight 8 issues that he responded to Robert
I
Senta
picked
Mchabalani.
8
You picked 8 issues.
from his
You
letter.
responded to 4.
And the
You
next-
promised that you respond to the
Yes.
next 4.
Yes.
Just explain to us, how did you arrive at your numbers? You say our real GDP growth today is $47.
I've given you the
Official
table.
figures say we are cruising at a comfortable 650.
I've given you the Excel table.
I have seen the Excel table. I've read through.
Yeah.
My head is not very good for numbers, but at least I can navigate. I see you started in 1986. You put
It's a simple one.
the GDP figures of then,
My
the increase,
friend here, the economist guy,
population.
it's a simple. You give it.
Let me simplify for you.
Mm-hmm. You want to look at this?
No, I have those numbers, Charles.
So
What has happened in this country is something that most people don't want to talk about. I met one of the senior economists in the Bank of Uganda, and I asked him, honestly, tell me what's our GDP growth? And he said, from when? And I said, just give me from 2012. And I can tell you that from 2012, we've experienced a regressive growth. Today, we are at 3.9%.
Mm-hmm.
In 2014, you had a growth of about 5.1% growth. Now, you are at 3.9%. That's regressive. That's minus. You have the exchange rate suffer a double digit from 2,400 per dollar about 5-6 years ago to
3,600
3,600
today.
in the black market, up to 3,700. That is more than about 12.8% depreciation.
Mr. Chair.
And in an economy where probably about 46% you depend on imports, it implies one thing, that the cost of doing business has gone up. Therefore, we are receiving less money in an economy. And that's the problem. That's the simple thing Jay is trying to explain.
Yes.
yeah. So you want to.
Your 103 years projection. No,
Yeah,
actually, it's more than you
but it is
103.
it's
It
very-
is
it's
135 years projection because you start in 1986
up to when
up to 2120.
Yeah, so-
That's 135 years.
the good
projection.
thing
Yes.
is that this is not my imagination. I use Excel,
Yes.
and anybody can do
Excel
it.
can project.
Anybody can do it.
Yes.
What you do, I started with the income GDP, the total GDP of the country, which was given by the president in his long writing of 14th January 2013, page 14 in New Vision. He said the GDP in 1986 was 246 million. Now the GDP of 6.6 growth, he also wrote it about some time, but that is also at the high level. I could have gone by 3 or 5, but I decided to give
Take the highest, at
the
6.6.
highest, 6.6. So if you get the 6.6 growth over annual growth increment on 246, so simple. The population was 14 million.
It's not
86.
It's not about 40.
So the population growth is 3.2. Everybody knows that.
Yes.
So you can see the population growth, divide the GDP growth with the population, they get the income per capita.
Yes.
Simple. See, that's what the Excel did. So what I did, and what I'm going to continue doing, is really to interrogate figures. For because to me, I believe that what we need is knowledge. For people to start questioning. You see, in Harvard, there is a paper, it's a kind of an intriguing paper for researchers. Somebody say, look, I've been looking at these things, but it doesn't make sense. So what is missing? So for me, I look, these people say the GDP growth has been this. But how come they cannot pay doctors? How come they cannot pay teachers? How come they cannot pay judicial officials? There's something wrong here. You understand? Then you look at on New Vision of 1st October 2014, page 14. Museveni wrote a long article about AGOA. And he said he is the one who started AGOA with a congressman called Ragiel. You understand? But when I looked at it, when I interrogated what are we achieving from this AGOA?
AGOA is the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act.
Yes.
Of,
now, in 10 years from 2003 to 2013, South Africa got 13 billion.
From AGOA?
Yes.
Or under AGOA?
AGOA, yes. Lesotho got 1.8 billion, Kenya got 1.3 billion, Mauritius got 817 million, and Uganda 5 million for 10 years. Then there's something wrong. So I interrogated these figures. I said there must be something wrong with the way we think about our GDP.
What explains that?
Let me first finish. In 2006, Sarkozy, the president then of France, also interrogated the GDP. He asked Professor Stiglitz and others, about 4. He said, there's something I don't understand about this GDP. How come this is not being achieved, yet we talk about this? And they wrote a book, How We Miscalculate Our GDP. So if you read that book, you pick a lot of intriguing points. So what I did was to interrogate the figures. And that's what I have done. And it is not chasing imagination. If I understand Mwenda has challenged me, let him bring his Excel. This is what I'm telling them.
Is that how you arrive at your numbers?
So what I'm trying to say, let Mr. Museveni and his World Bank people and the people from Bank of Uganda, those wonderful economists from Ministry of Finance, UBOS, let them do their Excel and show that this is how we get to our GDP income per capita of 700.
Honor, just before you take a break.
Without that, I would wish government to adopt this as official.
Can it? Maybe the question, can it? Honor, let me come back to you. Why is this kind of discussion? You work for a multinational that pays a lot of taxes to this country. Why is this kind of discussion not shaping our political debate?
Well, to your larger question, whether the politics affects the economy, for me, the biggest effect of our kind of politics, which I generally call the politics of desperados, whereby you have people in government who are desperate not to lose their jobs and those outside desperate to get in. It breeds a culture of lack of accountability. And that's the biggest damage, our politics, even where there is seemingly no obvious political problems. But so long as you have a government system where people are desperate not to lose office, it means much of the premium is put on political survival. And you cannot have proper economic growth or whatever income distribution where people are preoccupied with economic survival. It means everything is always distorted. The allocation is largely about power retention. And for us who come from the private sector where corporate governance demands that all allocations everyone must account. You cannot spend money without accounting, and you can be held responsible. How can you hold someone who is pivotal in the survival of a regime to account? I mean, you have, be it in Kenya, be it in Uganda, there are people who get away with murder in terms of misallocating or misappropriating public resources. Until when you have no politics of desperados, I don't see us moving economically.
Let's take a quick commercial break at that, and when we come back, we'll continue to interrogate the economics of the politics that we're experiencing within the region, not just in Uganda, but across the region. What does this mean? Because at the end of the day, we've got to count the change in the pockets of each individual. And if we're discussing the politics, I know people are waiting for the facilitation that comes with the police has issued summons to editors at the Monitor, editors at the Red Paper, and other newspapers which wrote about facilitating this process. And the government chief whip said we shall need some money. And so the economics of this political debate going on in the region. After a short commercial break, we'll continue. The politics of desperados, according to Onapito Ekomoloit. He says, those who hold power don't want to let go, are desperate to hold on to it. Those who want to get in are desperate to get in. So you have a combustible mixture of desperados running our politics and therefore dictating how the economy runs. The latest figures from Uganda Bureau of Statistics indicate that poverty levels in this country
Has increased.
have experienced a dramatic reversal.
Yes.
From a low 19%, not very long ago, to 27%. That's almost 9%, a 9% reversal, 9% of the population falling back into poverty. And these numbers have never been great at any one time, because you have a permanent between 8 and 10 million people who have permanently remained under the poverty line, in spite of all the progress we have made over the years. Then you have another about 10 to 15 million people that hover between poverty, and because we track our poverty in this country by using the consumption index, they can fall anytime. And that includes a lot of professional people working jobs and wearing neckties. The moment you take them out of the job, chances that they'll survive for the next 6 months at the same level of, actually you can see it among members of parliament. The moment someone loses a job in parliament, maybe apart from Monapito when he lost his, he continued to
Are you
fight
sure?
a bit.
Also went down slide.
He continued to thrive. But my big question to you gentlemen is, these are kinds of discussions that never take the front seat when we're discussing our politics. Now, everybody's lost talking about amendment of Article 102B. Previously, we were talking about the Land Amendment, and the fight around the Land Amendment Act was largely because of the economics of it. Article 102B, we're talking about facilitation. Nobody's talking about what this means to the economy. Let me just take a message from Jose Nwabine. I believe he's in Kabulari, Antonda. He says, I think it's very naive of anybody to think or say that what happened in Kenya in 2007 can't recur. The Kenyan population could be even more polarized than any other country's population in East Africa. But be that as it may, the politics of it must be me, which is the politics of desperados that he's talking about, must stop in Africa if we must move on. On our GDP, it's because we ceased to engage in meaningful production. We substituted production with politics. Politics is now the backbone of our economy.
True.
Is this true, Mr. Chair?
Yes, of course. We have got, it's not only that, but I think the ideology of the movement, or the ideology of Bwana Museveni, is an economic policy which keeps people poor.
How do you mean?
Let me give you an example. You know, recently he has this Nigeria thing of metal workers and the wood cutters and all that type of thing. Now, a generation of wood cutters and the water fetchers and the metal workers can never be rich at any one time. If you compare with the Kenya, what Kenyatta has done, he has created a cluster of leather workers in Athi River. So he has leather, and they are making leather products and for export and so on. Those are producers. It's a manufacturer. He has created another in Machakos, a city of textile for women. You can't compare textile people engaged in textile, making clothes, with the metal workers and the wood cutters. But the generation of wood cutters and water fetchers, really, washing the cars, can never be rich. You were looking, this country needs 70,000.
What are you talking about? Just across here, in Subway, there used to be a restaurant there. There is a presidential project supporting
I understand.
young women and men.
Yes, I agree with you, but this kind of projects keep country producing poorer people every generation. Instead of, we need 70,000 doctors. You understand? Then train and educate and have 70,000 doctors.
They're
It
going on
is.
strike.
Then, yeah, but we are talking about producing a generation that is going to be prosperous, and their sons and their children, their daughters also be rich. But what I'm trying to say, the policies which NRM is putting in place are policies that keep people poorer, and it will reproduce more peasants.
Ona, is that true? You have Operation Wealth Creation. It's a flagship project for the government. The president has been moving around and meeting all the... Yes, there's a group that operates just across here in Subway. From my window, I can look down and see what they're doing. I saw when the president came to launch them. There's another group, the one he's talking about, of people in Wande gear, I think around Kubi, the car washing team and others.
But where is the creation? Just 1 minute.
It's not
where is the creation? Where is the creation? It cannot succeed because historically, the only way agriculture can become useful is if there is a big high wage economy and industrial workforce to buy produce from the farmers. That's why you see pineapples ripe and get rotten in Iruero, and the mangoes in Teso get rotten, and things, because there is no big high wage economy in the country, industrial force. So the agriculture which they are talking about, again, is an agriculture that is going to keep people poorer and poorer. Continue.
Well, it's not, I don't agree with the chair entirely that President Museveni or NRM has bred or is having a politics of poverty creation. Look, President Museveni could not be in power for this long accidentally. He may be using force, his critics would argue, but he has also created a certain level of, I always like to say Ugandans are living with him positively, you know. They, they feel that there's a problem, but they are able to tolerate. One of the differences with the Kenya, I can tell you, is that the Nairobi City Council is very ruthless in terms of getting informal businesses out of the way. Like, you would not drive all the way from Entebbe out to Kampala with a lot of roadside trading. President Museveni has made sure that he has allowed borders and all these people to at least get daily bread. You know?
The question would be to what effect? Because
to what effect?
Look,
should the country be aspiring? Should the country be aspiring? Our ambitions, the size of our ambition, is to ride a border and get by for the day, or move the country?
You might have, would definitely have big ambitions, but I'm saying he has created a certain level of comfort zone for the ordinary person by especially allowing, you know, government has basically withdrawn in terms of supervising the individual, and the individual is left to their own vices in many parts of the country, but they are able to get by. And he knows it, that it works. You know,
Charles, in modern economics, there is a word called deepening poverty.
Yes, that's true.
Deepening poverty is a concept that tells of what happens when somebody makes you comfortable and you think you are actually out of poverty, but you can easily slide back in the worst poverty ever. You pass Nigeria every day. You've seen a workshop. That workshop is called Presidential Initiative. I don't know whether you've been there.
This other one down here is also a presidential initiative on something.
I don't even see whether it has more than 5 million shillings in it. Now, if you have 5 million shillings as your income, operating income, you are actually poor if you're a young person, because the demands of a young person are immense. But let me first, you see, we've discussed this without putting this country into context. There is a direct relationship between political stability and economic stability and progress. Correct. Direct. The only time Uganda had political certainty was between 1986 and 1995, during the constitutional making. Mr. Museveni had created a belief in everybody, including the Semogere, that all he needed was to make a constitution. And after the constitution, he would step aside. So everybody worked towards the efforts of the country. And I can tell you, between 1985 and 1995, economic growth of this country went to 11%, the highest ever. You can attest that. 11%. From that time, 1996 election, I was a very little boy, but I can read economics of that time. That from that time, what we've experienced is a slow but sure decline in an economy to a point from 11% in 1995 to the current parity 3.9%. Do you know why? Because people started opposing the president, started learning him to the extent that they still learn him today. Now, what you see today is uncertainty. Uncertainty of whether the economy, of whether we'll have stability, because the third sector, you know, the third sector in a country is the private sector and the NGO sector. the majority of those sectors had gotten involved into the governance programs. They earn money to do just that, to sensitize people, to grow democracy. And I can tell you as we speak now, most of those guys are cold fitted. That means that if 30% of our foreign direct investment was coming through a sector like that of La Roque, in the meantime, you are not going to have that. So the 3.9 you realize today, there is time when we did an economic analysis of an NGO. And I can tell you there is time when the income that went to northern Uganda, reconstruction, through the government and the NGO, was almost bigger than the national budget of this country. Now, when scared, I was reading somewhere where Action Aid International was saying, open our account, we want access to our money. The Swedish guy are saying, please open, we want access to the money. The implication of such statement
It's dangerous. Yeah.
is dangerous and scary. And I don't know where Mr. Kasekende, an economist, should have not learned that in the books of economics.
Well, the police wrote to him and told him, freeze these accounts, we're investigating them. He's doing a statutory, his office demands that.
It's therefore, just let me complete this, because it's very important for us to put this in the context. I've heard Mr. Chie talk about per capita income. And I have said before that even when I studied the Keynesian theories, I seem to have fallen back to Adam Smith's theory. And I believe that it is wrong for you to use a per capita measure as a measure of economic well-being of a person. Because look at us, Chelsea. You could be holding 50 million, and I'm holding probably 5,000 shillings. But in order for us to get the per capita income of all of us here, we will add it and then divide, and then in theory, I will get a part of that money that you have.
I wish I did, actually.
So the living, so I am
It's deceitful, that's true.
I am a proponent of the living standard measure
Correct.
that come and see how I live.
Yes.
In order for you to say that I am better off or I'm not.
True.
Yes.
True. Yeah.
And in Uganda, those old men who sit there in Bank of Uganda, they still apply the Keynesian theory, which is deceptive, untrue, and it's meant to be politics, to do politics.
Yes, because I actually wanted to go there, because I think it answers it helps explain politically, and you tell everybody we're doing better than we're doing before, even if individually, when people retreat, they realize they are alone on this journey. Yeah. But Arthur, let me come back to you. You talked about questions of governance and democracy. And I keep asking the question, why doesn't this come through our political debates? Why is it absent? We talk about the police will be running around and saying, you see, when we're having demonstrations in Kampala, they're saying these people are being paid 1,000 shillings to get on the street and demonstrate.
Yeah.
But by the time you have a population that is easy to pay 1,000 shillings to demonstrate, you have a problem. I think the majority of the people demonstrating in the Kenyan political crisis today would be described in more or less the same terms.
And there are those that actually don't demonstrate because they don't even have that 1,000. So the situation is much worse. So first, just three points on the preamble you set for this segment. One, I have always doubted the dramatic reduction in poverty. I don't think it ever happened in our country. From 56 to 19, in Kampala is 12. You know, sometimes there was an article that Andrew wrote long time ago that suggested that when you did a poverty analysis during elections, it's likely to be very low. It could be scientifically right, because if you measure poverty if you measure expenditure as a proxy for income during elections, of course, people are spending and eating fish and drinking pork and whatever it is.
And drinking a little bit more beer, because they're telling the candidates, you can't, I'm not going to drink waraji when I can drink a beer from you.
It's very difficult to explain whether the Ministry of Finance or you, boss, how poverty can reduce in 3 or 4 years from 34 to 19. It's just then from 19 it has gone to 27. When few years ago we were told we were moving, it doesn't make sense. I'm not an economist, but there's just too much political gymnastics with those figures. So that one is one point that I doubt even that 27%, its validity, whether it is higher or lower, it's a question we need to ask. Now on the 1,000 and protesters, I think what our ruling elite have done is that they have made everybody a survivor, you know. So I think President Museveni is as much a survivor as a boda person. They just, he seeks to remain in power because he wants to survive. He knows out of power, I have problems. I think that's the reason he wants to cling on to power, plus other challenges and fears he might have. The boda guy is working the whole night just to make ends meet. He's a survivor. So when you put everybody in a survival mode, it's very, very difficult sometimes to just exercise certain rights. And I think that low-level equilibrium is something that is very, very unfortunate. Now, the heydays that Wakida talked about, 1986, 87, 95, I don't even think the president was, okay, I think there was a convergence. The kinds of things that President Museveni needed to do to remain in power were the same things that citizens desired. Yeah. Okay, so there was a bit of convergence. But after 1997, I think the things he needed to do to remain in power were completely at parallel with what we desire for service delivery. So
how does it get re-elected in 2001, 2006, 2011, and 2016?
Quite honestly, out of those 5 elections, I can, you know, speak about one. I don't think it is very clear who wins elections in this country. It's very, very much debatable. At least 2 of them were highly contested, and you can argue if we had a more courageous judiciary, I think in 2001 or 2006, they might have overturned that election. The one of 2026, I'm just absolutely unsure. Who,
2016, you mean?
2016.
Or you're projecting ahead? Because
no, 2016. 2016, you can't be sure about who could have won the election. So anyway, I have problems with statistics, whether they are political, electoral commission, or poverty. There are problems. Sometimes it's really to explain the politics. But I wanted to end this segment with just a few points around what Wakida talked about. So you close ActionAid's or bank accounts, you know. Every month we spend in taxes and savings in NSSF and others, 440 million. I've not even calculated what my staff spend, you know, advancing honors business, you know. So there is a lot that the economy is losing by just closing an NGO like ActionAid. And this 440 million is just, you know, what we directly spend, buying fuel, paying taxes, and whatever. Now, if you consider that 22%, this 440 is like 22% of our monthly expenditure, what we actually do in programs, advancing livelihoods for women, smallholder farmers, it's about 1.5 billion. So for the longer time our offices and bank accounts are closed, the economy is losing. And the question actually is not so much the problem of how much the economy is losing, it is why. Why are they shutting ActionAid? Okay, you know, it's the question about challenging power.
You're not alone. I think GLIS, Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies, Uhuru Institute, and maybe others to come,
and many others will suffer the fate. I think there is absolutely no need. There is no need to engage. If we were running politics of interest, putting interests of people, all the things that are happening in our country would be unnecessary. Okay. Just unnecessary
coming back Charles, to... can we come back to this after a very short break? Because I need to take a few messages, then I'll start with you. Or is it... You must say it now?
No, it's okay.
Okay. Someone here says, Cheye should at least offer up his best year so that we can also interrogate his interrogation. What's your best year?
Best year.
What?
86.
When
What
did you
again?
start,
Base year.
start the analysis?
86, I thought.
86?
The what?
Your base year. Che should at least offer us his base year
That's
so that we can also
1986.
interrogate his interrogation. 1996, you have it?
86.
Yes. Okay, let me take a message. Someone else says, Dr. Wakida, isn't growing an economy of 27 billion by 3% better than growing an economy of 5 billion by 11%? Thanks for the show. This is Wurite Joseph. Wurite Joseph is...
I didn't get what he said.
he says, isn't it better? Dr. Wakida, isn't it... isn't growing an economy of $27 billion by 3% better than growing an economy of $5 billion by 11%? Anthony says, thanks again for the show. Yes, someone wants you to share the spreadsheet you are using to make the projections.
Yeah, we can give him on WhatsApp.
Mm-hmm.
Tell him we can.
Okay.
Actually, I've actually
WhatsApp?
seen it.
WhatsApp, I think the person who has sent this message will get this. Someone says, I think the government is taking us for a ride, especially with numbers. We need to shift to decision making backed by data, not one which is backed by emotion and sentiment. James in Nakawa says, please remind Honor that Museveni's strategy of keeping people in poverty is real, so that the election is cheaper and easier to buy. And bulldoze during elections, pay the electoral commission to doctor his win, pay off the, he mentioned some people here, to sing whatever song he loves most. This is someone called James in Nakawa. Andrew Irumba says, to understand Muzei Cheye's point, just remembered that there is Operation Wealth Creation, but there was also Bonawa Gagawale. So where are statistics and evidence of the beneficiaries of these projects? Anyway, if you want to rule, not to lead, the surest way is to impoverish the people you lead so that you can disempower them, because then their hopes rest in your mercy. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll be looking at the agitation from professional groups, especially the medical workers and the people, the prosecutors who are going on strike, and then wrapping this up to look at what it means for the region, the economics of the political situation in the region. We'll be right back. Welcome back to this last segment. We'll be flashing our number on your screen so that you can call us and share with us your views and opinions. The economics of the political situation, the political standoff within the region. We have a full-blown standoff in Kenya and, of course, in Uganda. I'm just wondering how many people seated in boardrooms making decisions about where to put their money, the much cherished investor that we talk about in this country, in European and other Western capitals, how they're looking at the situation in Kampala over the debate over Article 102B, the land amendment, and what decisions they are making long term. Some of that calculation will have to come in the next 5-10 years, or even longer. We may not be able to have an accurate prediction of where this is going because we haven't looked at the numbers. And especially if your Minister for Investments is the one leading some of this campaign, how you make the different pitches. Someone here says, Arthur, why action aid out of the thousands of NGOs in this country? There is no smoke without fire. I also see intense debate on what we talked about as NGO subsidy to government. People are highlighting what the NGO sector does. It actually not in places you're talking about, not in service delivery to the people, but they're saying NGO workshops sustain the hotel industry in this country. So when the government goes after NGOs and freezes their accounts, what does that mean? Honor, you wanted to say something. You wanted to conclude your thought.
Yeah, I know you kept on asking the question, why isn't the economic question always surfacing in our political debates? Almost you could ask the same question, why do voters, forget about the presidential election, actually maybe the parliamentary election is a much more better test. Why would they consistently, for example, vote for some people who have not answered their economic questions? I think there are two elements to it. One of them is that most people in Uganda actually have lost. They are cynical about the power of government to change their lives, you know?
Yeah.
And that is partly serving the powers that be, the establishment, whereby people feel, some of them feel nobody among the politicians can change their lot. So you find people do not make economic considerations when debating about political issues. Then the other element is that most of the political actors don't have vested economic interests. They are not big business owners. They don't really have much that can be impacted by the politics. They are basically politics of groceries. They don't own industries. So if you went to do politics and at the same time you are owning big business, you'll be definitely concerned that government policies should not be affecting your business.
So if we take this back to where we began this discussion from, do you think that makes a difference between how Kenyans, for example, look at their politics and how Ugandans do?
Absolutely, because I'm sure most of the political actors, they are also big business owners. They own hotels, industries, and what have you. So there is a time when they feel they have to pull back to save their businesses. But here, most of the key political actors do not have big economic investments that will be impacted by
Charles,
politics.
there is something I want to say about this. You see, when you read the spirit of that constitution of yours, it does not only talk about politics, but it also guarantees economic certainty. Those clauses, the term limit, the age limit, were not only put there to stop people from contesting after a certain time, but that people should be preoccupied with making people better, which is not happening now. Because somebody realizes that it's an open space. So he spends more time creating survival modes for the next election. We've just come out of a very expensive election, 2016, where MPs spent a lot of money. Barely 1 year, we've entered another political season. And you don't expect anybody at this point. That's why you see, if you look at the projects within the parliament, one of the most important projects as of today, which can attract everybody, is to discuss politics. Now, our youth, the younger people, have mastered that. They don't have jobs, so they will wait for a politician for any handout. People are not working. People are focusing on how much can I get from Charles, who will come. The rumor has been going around, so and so has released money for this and that. Everybody in the village is going to run to a place where they will expect 500 shillings. That is the implication of what you're seeing, the political gymnastics you're seeing. I have said before that probably there is too much politics in this country than...
You're not alone. I think many people have talked about that, too much politics. Even President Museveni previously telling people in the opposition, the political season is over, go back to your gardens, stop this politics.
But you know that it's now
keeps coming back, yes.
Now, for me, I have always argued, and I've always said, that if you know what you will do the following day, and you know when you will start that, you don't want to wake up early to start to prepare for that, because you know what you're supposed to do.
Let me take a message from Yedidia Nyakahangura, who says, Africa, and East Africa in particular, is back in the 18th century state formation. Look at South Sudan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Kenya, Burundi, Uganda, etc. All the happenings indicate we have failed to have a face and an identity. Leaders are betraying the masses are betraying their countries by advancing power, power-hungry leaders who for all they care about is regime survival. I have some callers online. I need to pick a few and then we can continue the discussion inside here.
But Charles,
yes, please.
These MPs are being beaten.
Pardon?
MPs who have gone to consult They are being beaten left, right, and center.
Because they are not consulted.
I've just been seeing.
No, I think those MPs I have seen some of the messages,
Imposing
especially.
their views.
I think Kiwanda, Godfrey Kiwanda, and his colleague in.
This chap in Mbarara.
Yes, I have seen the. I saw the video from Barara also popping up on the on WhatsApp
Why
a
do
few
you
minutes
subject
ago.
leaders to that kind of pain?
The question maybe we might need to ponder on another show is when you have something like term limits.
Yes.
The regime in power is under pressure. Chair was talking about Kenya. What Uhuru Kenyatta was able to achieve in his first 5 years
so much
was because he knew he had an election coming up, and his electability depended on how much he's able to deliver.
Yes.
That's true.
Now, if he has another 5 years, and assuming that the plan for Jubilee is after Uhuru Kenyatta to pass the baton
To Ruto.
to William Ruto,
They will work hard.
Yeah.
these 5 years they must deliver so that Ruto has a chance at being elected.
Absolutely.
If you don't have that, then...
If you buy votes, you don't have to deliver.
Okay, let me take some callers. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello.
I can hear someone. Yes. Your name and where you're calling from, sir?
Yeah, I'm calling from here in Kawimpi, but I'm from Mbarara.
Your name, sir?
I'm called Sulait.
Yes, please.
I'm called Sulait, and I'm here in Kawimpi.
Sulait, go ahead with your question or comment, please.
I'm called Sulait.
Sulait, you are listening to yourself. Please turn down the volume on your TV.
Really, I don't know what's going on with our president, really.
Yes, please. Can you turn down your TV, the volume on your TV set, please? You are listening to yourself, and we are getting feedback in the studio. Hello? I think we lost light. You can call us back, but first turn down the volume on your TV set when you call us. Hello?
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
I'm called Dr. Bumba Ahmed. Dr. Ahmed, how are you?
I'm very good, sir.
I think even we who are commentators about politics have done us a disservice. For example, this second segment was supposed to discuss the strikes by the state attorneys and the health workers. But we have gone back to discussing the same age limit issue.
Yes.
So, in my own opinion, it is these strikes by different public servants which are actually going to bring this government on its knees, but not the political issue.
Okay.
And could we discuss a little bit more on that perspective of the strikes? Because as medical workers, unless our salaries are enhanced, we shall definitely strike on the 16th of November.
Thank you very much, Doctor. We'll go into that. We actually hadn't had a discussion on this segment. Someone just sent, two of the panelists wanted to say something from the last unconcluded segment. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, please?
Yes, good evening, Charles, and the rest of the
We can't hear you. We can hardly hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hardly hear you.
Okay, good evening, Charles,
yes,
and the
it's
rest.
getting better now, yes? Yes?
Okay, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Okay, now I'm called Richard Maro. I have a few observations.
Yes, please.
First in Kenya, I really wonder if Mr. Kenyatta really knows that Kenya loves him and voted him in the first place. Why is he insisting on not having reform to the extent that his main opponent has to bow out of the election, and still Kenyatta still goes on to say...
Richard, I can hardly hear you. I can hardly hear you. Can you please call us back? Hello? 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 Do you have someone? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, sir. Your name and where you're calling from?
Eric.
Your name again?
I'm calling Eric.
Yes, Eric.
Eric from Munyonyo.
From Munyonyo. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for that show.
You're welcome.
I think the biggest problem Uganda has is the leadership. President Museveni is tired. That's why actually there is a big gap between his policies
and there would be policies a government should be adopting at the moment. When you compare the likes of Uhuru and Ruto, these are young people that are actually in touch with the realities. But President Museveni politicizes each and everything. And he has a group of people around him that never bother to advise him. What they say is, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. And his overstaying power has had another bad effect onto this country, whereby he can no longer fight corruption. Because Uganda has a lot of money, the problem with Uganda has never been lack of money. Now, because his major aim is to retain power, he cannot challenge anybody. Even if he gets someone red-handed, he would say, no. You remember what he said one time with Mbabazi, that when you're drinking a cup of tea and the leaf falls off the tree and it goes into your cup, do you power the tea away? You simply remove the leaf, continue taking your tea. That's the problem.
Okay.
So, gentlemen, unless we address the issue of corruption and leadership, Uganda will never go anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Eric.
Charles.
Can I just take a few more calls and then we can respond at once? Because we also have to have that discussion about the strikes and what they mean. Hello? Hello? Oof. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, sir. Your name and where you're calling from?
Etiang is my name.
Your name is?
Etiang.
Etiang. Yes, please.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm calling from Kampala.
Yes, Etiang.
I thank the panel. My comment is, we have forgotten our enemy. You remember during colonial time, the enemy was a man in a white skin. Now today we have an enemy in a black skin. So that enemy is the one leading to all these problems that we are discussing.
What do you mean?
Yes, our enemy is President Museveni.
How? That might be your opinion. There are people who love him and who vote for him.
Yes, okay, that's my opinion. That is our...
Okay, we lost that one.
The president's...
Hello?
I'll cut him off.
The president's supporters seem to have cut Etiang off. Sorry, Etiang, I think we lost you there. Hello? Hello?
Yes, hello.
Yes, sir?
Yeah, this is Emma.
Yes,
Kabramaido.
You're calling from?
Kabramaido.
Kabramaido. Please go ahead.
Yes. I think the biggest problem is Uganda for the region. All these other states of the region are copying bad habits from Uganda.
Like?
Manipulations. As elections come, people don't get it very well. They go to court.
Hello? 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 I don't know what happened to Emma. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, I can hear someone on the phone. Hello? Oh, that's cracking my ears. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, please. Your name and where you're calling from. Please turn down the volume on your TV set.
This is William.
William, turn down the volume on your TV set.
This is from Chivale district.
Yes, please.
This is William calling from Chivale.
Yes, William.
Hello. This is William.
William, we can hear you, but there is a lot of noise coming from where you are. I think you're listening to yourself on your TV. Please turn down the volume. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, please.
Yes, good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir. Your name and where you're calling from?
I'm called Disan calling from Chireka.
Yes, please.
Thanks for the program.
You're welcome.
Yes, so I have a feeling that the problem with our Ugandan society is here the elites.
Is?
Who think you know the problem of this country. You see it and recognize it in your English. and do not go on ground to tell the people the real thing to do. Because the villagers down there do not know really what is affecting this country. For them, they just cook their small matoke if they have it, their cassava, and eat and sleep. So whoever affects it and tells them that Museveni is the best, they just go with that. For you people who know the thing, you have to go on ground and tell those people the right thing to do. Thank you.
And where does that leave you, sir?
Sorry?
I thought you're supposed to be one of those. Are you on the elite side or the peasant side?
No, but I'm just a peasant. I just went to school. I know my small English and can survive in
Thank you very much. We need to bring this discussion back into studio. I'll take a few more messages from those who send messages to my phone. The debate continues. It's going on our social media sites on both Twitter and on Facebook. Go to the NTV pages and continue this discussion. I'm sorry I can't take more phone calls because we got to bring this show to an end. Someone here says, Mwangusha, do you realize that NRM MPs can no longer rush for microphones from journalists outside parliamentary chambers to talk because they have nothing to tell their constituencies? This is Bernard Mpeirwe. Another, let me see. Yes, someone else here says, and the panelist tonight, I am tempted to resend a message which I sent you a week ago when you hosted Omona. I told you that with the current rate of business closure in the country, poverty levels will continue shooting high and higher. People are getting poorer by the day in, day out. Put aside the sweet speeches from politicians who are on the eating table. What do you expect to hear from a person who has $100 million on accounts in European banks? I would love to know who this one is. Does such a person know about poverty really? Yet he or she is the one delivering a speech about poverty levels in Uganda. Whoever you're talking about, I have seen lots of Ugandans who we believe have a lot of money. When they have a family emergency, someone falls sick in their family, and they have to be delivered to a medical facility within this country. If it's dysfunctional, the millions of dollars, wherever you're keeping them, don't come to your help.
Yeah.
There are places, even if you had the capacity to charter a private plane to pick a patient from Fort Portal, if I come from my area, that they must be delivered to where the plane is. If the road is dysfunctional, if there is no ambulance to deliver them there, at the end of the day, I who doesn't have the money and you who has the money are basically in the same boat. Gentlemen, we need to bring this discussion to an end, but I need you, as you give your comments, to reflect on the fact that professional groups are going on strike, demanding for more money. There are two schools of thought around these strikes. One is, I mean, schools of thought in how government is likely to respond to them, especially at a time like this. Is President Museveni going to think these are people trying to ride the political storm going on and take advantage of me? Or is there a genuine need? Or are they actually thinking and saying, this is a good timing to put government under pressure? How is it going to play out? As which will also be your concluding remarks, Mr. Chair, starting with you.
Well, first of all, the strikes are not surprising because, as I have shown, the economy has completely been ruined. The income per capita is just $47. So the country is poor. The people have failed to build a cake, an economic cake. So this is expected. Two, there is also a false ideology. The same ideology I've been telling you of keeping Ugandans poor. The ideology of Mr. Museveni is that I saw him when he was giving these washing machines to a group of youth, and he was telling them, you know, there are some people who are agitating for salary increase, but you are not voicing against that. So he believes that giving people peanuts is patriotic and it is developmental. Now, history is very, very clear on how societies develop. You need a high wage economy in order to develop. There is no country that develops on the basis of slave wage. So you have got two issues here. One is the ideological, which believes that people should be given peanuts, and that's a form of development.
I don't think Museveni or his government have said they are giving people peanuts because as a slave wage, as a form of economic development. The saying is, where do you put your priority? When teachers went on strike, the argument was, we are investing in large infrastructure projects. We're investing in energy production.
Absolutely.
We're investing in roads, railways.
Yes, but if you invest in infrastructure, roads and dams and so on, and you are not giving a high wage economy, that infrastructure will not lead to development. Tanzania has got one of the best road network. It is not developed. Congo Brazzaville, Gambia, Namibia, they have got a high consumption of electricity per capita, but they are not developed. You have to merge the two. You have to create demand, which is a high wage economy, and then supply. Yeah. Unfortunately, they don't seem to see this. So the only way you need, look, when Lee Kuan Yew was getting in 1960, he tried so much to have Malaysia and Singapore come together, emerge as one country, because he was looking at the miracle of 80 million people. At that time, he had less than 2 million people. To him, the people were the most important capital to start with. Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, you have got 80 million people, but they are not consuming anything. So unless you make clear...
We've been working on an economy of 150 to 160 million people within the East African Community region.
But those people are not consuming...
40 million Ugandans, close to 50 million Kenyans, you have the Rwandans and the Burundians.
But the population of people, when they don't have a high wage economy, are useless. You would rather have 5 million people in Singapore who have income per capita of $50,000. So unless the leadership of Africa realize that the starting point is to create a high wage economy. Now the issue will be, where do they get the money? Now money, the sources of money are also very clear. You either get it from taxi, you either domestically borrow, or you print to fill the gap. This is something that they don't discuss. So that's the problem. But before I forget Kenya again, you see, although they had a crisis in 2007, but because they saw, the donors and investors saw that there is a political maturity in Kenya, in fact, investment has gone up. As of now, there are over 200 multinational companies there, and 20 of them are regional representatives. So 20 of them, they are based in Kenya to look at the regional market. In 2013, the direct foreign investment was 259 million. In 2015, it was 1.4 billion. In 2016, it shot to 1.9 billion.
That's in Kenya?
Yes, in Kenya.
How do the Ugandan numbers compare?
They are very bad. Very bad. Very negligible. They are not even there, because if they were there, these people would be talking about them. If they were there, the Minister of Investment would be throwing them up.
Okay.
They are not there. So concluding is that the people who are striking, they are doing it genuinely, because in a business management, as I have said it before, you have to set a target. Once you have set a target, you must reward the people who are going to achieve that target. And then you must be able to evaluate. This is a theory that was developed by Frederick Taylor in 1911. You understand? Now you have teachers, you have hired them, you want to achieve something, you have doctors, you want them to achieve something, you must reward them. That's a scientific law. If you don't do that, how will you evaluate them? So the doctors are correct. They should be given competitive wages so that their income is closer to what a fellow doctor earns in South Africa.
Will the politics allow them to get those wages?
Now we have a problem of politics which lacks economics knowledge. There is a zeal, but they don't have the knowledge, and that's a problem.
Okay. Honor, this will also be your concluding remarks. You listen to the viewers, send us their feedback and what their views about what we're discussing and how we contextualize it.
In terms of the professional striking, I think the prosecutors had a long strike. Then now, of course, you have doctors. Makera is perpetually in strike. It's the most logical. I don't know whether the strike is the most logical, but their demands. I mean, most of the public servants are earning slave wages, so to say.
That's the problem.
And it's just unbelievable. And of course, that's why public service does not work. So most of the people just do not concentrate on their work. Either they are tinkering with the resources at their disposal for their personal gain, or they are just not paying enough attention to their work in order to look for alternative income. But I know that most of the strikes failed, again, because of politics. Historically, most of the strike leaders have ended up in politics. You know, and that's one of the biggest challenges in the professional space. They always get divided. by the politics and people are cherry-picked, they end up getting politically parachuted. And that's why the strikes have never achieved their end. Most of the the strike leaders at Makerere have ended up at the center of politics. And even among doctors, it's always...
You're talking...
so unless if the profession...
I don't know. Chairing an electoral commission.
So that's one of the other challenges. But also I think the doctors in particular should not just be asking for a better way. They should also ask for a reform of the healthcare system in this country. Is it possible
in our political situation? Because if the politics decides what...
It may not be possible because the politics is for populism. To maintain a facade that you can offer a free healthcare when you all know that it's not happening. Most of the people are leaving government clinics and going for private clinics because they don't either get the workers there or they don't get the medicine. So something must change. So you must not only address the wages, you must also address the way the healthcare functions. Can it start generating some revenue and be self-perpetuating? So these are the questions the medical people need to ask.
I hear you on that. Sometimes I ask the question, then what will government be there for? It can't just be an absentee landlord, comes and collects from everybody, gives back nothing, and expects you to continue subsidizing it.
Absolutely.
Of course you can choose to say that government must do it and government doesn't do it and we are in a vicious cycle, or you can choose to say let's have a middle ground. Something must change in the Uganda's healthcare. I don't think the current healthcare system can sustain the workers on a reasonable wage and cannot even benefit the patients. So something has changed.
If you look at the government's contribution to the education sector, for example, where we've been seeing about UPE and USE for the last 20 years, if you look at, I think it's 700 shillings per child per month.
The good figure on that is that in 1960, 62, the expenditure of the budget, 27% of the budget went to education. Right now, it is only 3%.
Yes.
Can you see?
So
you can see there is no priority.
Education is being sourced.
There's no priority.
Charles,
it has no quality. Majority of people who access medical service, health service in this country, are getting it from private players.
Very good.
If someone called you from Amuria today and said, someone is sick here, the thing you'll ask them is, have they gone to a clinic? And not a government facility. So
you have to send mobile money.
Then you have to send mobile money, and then you have to transfer them and bring them here, not in a public ambulance, but in a private ambulance or private car, and then take them to a private doctor, a private clinic, pay consultation fees.
That's what I'm saying. The doctors, in addition to demanding for better wages, must also take a position on that question. And even offer solutions.
Dr. Okida and Arthur, before I come to you, let me take some more messages. Someone says, Semanda says, well, I recognize Odinga's efforts in democratizing Kenya. Calling for protests is deadly. He is the very person claiming to take Kenya to Canaan, and yet the same person who is the best ally of George Soros, whom he met in the UK this week. Remember, Hungarian parliament branded Soros satanic. And the New American called him a lord of chaos who pursues a world order that is demonic to divine. I don't know what you have against George Soros and their meeting, but Samanda thinks that calling for protests is not the best way to go for Kenya. I need to take another message here. I think I've lost that message. Yes, there was a message from that had popped up. Yes, it popped up here. Let me take. Yes, Frank Gashumba says, in a country where 84% of the youth are unemployed, their mindset rotates on sports betting, boda, sachet waraji, European football, I think the Premier League and other things. Basically, there is no sense of innovation and production to spur economic growth and national progress. That's Frank Gashumba. Someone else here says, please tell Honor, it's not medics to demand for better health systems, but citizens.
Good, the citizens are listening.
And this is one of the citizens who sent the message. Let me come to you, Dr. Okida, in your concluding remarks on both the economics of the region and the political situation, and particularly the workers by professional.
No, I think, Charles, what all of us and most Ugandans have depended on has been the security and the peace. this country has experienced. And we should all fight to see that that happens. The uncertainty that you witness today has got a very, very high bearing on how businesses will survive, those who are surviving. Not forgetting that Uganda in the region has got almost the biggest number of people who enter into businesses every year. Unfortunately, it still has the biggest number of businesses that die within 12 months of its beginning. So peace and security is going to be important. But you have talked about the health workers' position. You have talked about clinics and drug shops. For us in economics, we see demand generates supply. Forces of demand and supply. The reason why you see clinics and drug shops, it's not by accident. It's that there is demand for such services for which the custodian is not providing. So everybody is running to start a business of that nature. The problem is, even the owner here, who on the 30th of every month he pays pay as you earn, he still pays another tax in treating his mother and his sister and brothers. And that is what the elite class should be concerned. One of the things that help an economy are people. And one of the biggest achievements of Mr. Museveni from 1985 to 1995 was his ability to identify people with skills and integrate them in government to run government. You had very competent people. Kintu Musokes, they were Pakaburos. Those were educated people, people of influence. Today, you have people who have nothing to lose but to gain, appointed in the positions of investment. I can tell you that if you went to a conference in Britain and you are meeting this man of what is it called, the one of computers, and you have this Minister of Investment, tell me, what proposal would you be able to take? Let me tell you, people take what comes from people. I will listen to you if first of all I see sense in you. I will therefore pay attention. And I will take what you say when I see the person giving that proposal has sense. People who are appointed in the position of responsibility today cannot attract direct foreign investment in this country.
Okay.
That partly explains why you see this fall. If you have 2 children and you're sending children to the well to collect water, you must know which child to give which jerrycan.
Okay. Which pot?
Which pot?
Jerrycans will survive.
Yes,
that's the beauty
which
of
pot?
plastic.
Let
me just take one last message and then I'll come to Arthur. Someone says, Charles and the great panelist, thanks for the show. One fundamental mistake Museveni and his government has made is to make districts points of service delivery. What services? Yes. Health, education, agriculture, and what? To change this country, we need to change the approach and make districts production units. We should know which districts produces what quantity, who are the growers, what's their land size, what are their input needs, etc. Unless we activate rural economy in a model owner and Nile breweries are doing with the contact farmers, we will remain poor and poorer, not because Uganda is a Kampala economy. And I think this is from Bahati. The big question we've been trying to answer here is why the politics is not responding to things like this. Why are people more excited having some little entity called a district handed to them than seeing what it produces for them? Kind of allow me to thank you for bringing back Muzei Teddy says Cheye, and my big brother Dr. Wakida. We come from the same area in Bugwere land. This is someone called Fred.
Yes, Forest.
So he's coming from the Republic of Djibouti.
Let's take a message from Musa Ladu, who says, as you conclude the show, tell Honor his capitalistic views on health sector is not the prescription but cause of the problem the sector is grappling with. Okay, Arthur, we wind up with you. You have medical workers calling a strike. You have prosecutors who have been on strike for some time. You have the cyclical strikes that I think Makere has been agitating somehow quietly, Chambogo and the other institutions. You're driving literally to a service delivery paralysis because the politics is lost discussing whether you should amend 102B or not. And the arguments being advanced so far, I have had people say President Museveni is still, because I think the veil has been lifted now. One of the biggest motivators for this change has been lifted. The president has spoken about it, but the people, the foot soldiers who are trying to package this and deliver it are saying the president is still strong enough, he's still the best person we have. The question is, how does this debate lift the country to lower middle income status in 2020 when you have this litany of problems?
Or 2120.
Yeah, or 2120. That's 135 years. We have enough time to think about it.
Okay, I think that three concluding points for me. First, I need to respond to somebody who said there is no smoke without fire. And that
why you out of the thousands?
Yeah, I mean, first, I think it's not right to think ActionAid is the only one. There are many other civil society organizations that are facing similar threats, because it's just a shrinking civic and political space. So anybody with what we are seeing is a huge crackdown on dissent, whether you're in the media, you're in political parties, you're in somewhere else. If you're in a business that speaks strongly about you, will also be constrained. So it's not just ActionAid. ActionAid is a small part actually of a bigger situation that we should be seeing. So there's lots more you will see, depending on how we respond to this effectively. If we don't, you are going to see more stones roll, and so we will do our best to respond to that. On the question of strikes, I agree with everybody else that they are not new. People can take advantage of a particular situation and demand, because then they know you need to make your case when there is a level of vulnerability, or there is a demand, there is an exchange, especially when you have transactional leaders like we have in Uganda, where, you know, give me this, I give you that type of leader. That's a transaction. Everything leadership is about transacting a business. You will expect this to happen. But teachers, doctors, nurses, I'm waiting for the day when farmers can strike. Because they really are the worst of the lot, because cooperatives were killed. So really, at the end of the day, the lifestyle, the life of people in rural areas is no better. So I think that the challenge is that the government is getting its priorities completely wrong. Even if some concessions are made to teachers, some concessions are made to medical workers, they should know that this cannot be sustained if the trajectory that our government has taken continues. Because if you start investing more in districts rather than in productivity, like somebody said, you cannot sustain 15%, 20%, whatever percent. If you are spending all your time just bribing people, part of the politics of patronage, you cannot sustain service delivery, like Cheye mentioned earlier. So I think all dissenting voices should not just act in opportunistic ways. We should think about the long-term transformation that would lead to greater equity, shared prosperity, and equal opportunity for people. Otherwise, you will continue to see these strikes. Today they are teachers, tomorrow they are local government officials, the other day they are prosecutors, police might strike one day, you know. All this is because the economy is not working for everybody, and people are feeling the sense of injustice. My final point really is that the solution to all this in the short and medium term is fixing our political questions. Uganda, in my view, is ripe for a political transition. By the current construct of our constitution, there must be leadership change in 2021. So if Ugandans who are resisting the change of Article 102 succeed, there might be interesting dynamics, including within the NRM. I think the NRM should be focusing on succession because then they still have capacity to do certain things for 3 years. And political parties need to start preparing, you know, agendas that will make Uganda have a genuine political transition. Then we can deal with many other economic matters, social matters. Because in the current context, everybody looks at politics as the problem, and it's painful for a student of political science like me to say the problem of Uganda is politics. I mean, politics is, there's not too much politics, Wakida. Politics is every single day. It's about distribution of resources. So it is politicking and this patronage that is destroying what we should be doing. So I think we are ready. We should be preparing for a political transition, whether it's through dialogue, whether it's through resistance that people are going to make, whether it's through pressure to members of parliament. We should simply solve our political quagmire. Otherwise, economy, society, tourism will be affected.
Our time is out.
I think that's the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much, Mr. Teddy Seze, publisher and editor-in-chief of the Uganda Confidential.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to have you here. I can see tracking social media, your article is still being debated up to this hour.
Really?
Yes, they're still debating it. And we look forward to seeing the second dose, which will come on next weekend. Thank you very much, Onapito Ekomoloit, Legal and Corporate Affairs Director at Nile Breweries AB InBev, and a panelist on the Fourth Estate. Permanent panelist, founded the show and is still here. Dr. Patrick Wakida is Chief Executive Officer at Research World International. I understand you are conducting a survey on what is going on now. We'll be looking forward to getting what your findings are. We just fed on the one of the Afrobarometer, but I'm told that data had been collected a little bit earlier, so we need a little bit more current data. And Arthur Larocque, Country Director at Action Aid International Uganda. We are watching to see how your situation gets resolved, you together with the other colleagues with your other friends in the civil society sector. We'll continue the debate and asking the questions that are not coming up in the political discourse in the country, especially looking at what is in it for you and me, the ordinary people. From me, thank you very much to our production crew. Stay up late to deliver this show to you, and of course to you, the viewer, who stays up late and for the feedback that you give us. Have a good night.